The pool of managers in the Championship this season is a really, really interesting mix. You've got an abundance of managers with promotions on their CV, with others that are becoming elite Championship managers in their own right. You've got a bunch of other managers who have never entered the league before, and others that have something to prove. So today we're going to be tier listing all 24 managers from the Championship in the upcoming season. So here we go, we've got the tier list here. We've got 5 specific segments. We've got what I would class as elite Championship managers who have got a fantastic track record and are undoubted successes at this level. I've got solid Championship managers who you'd expect to do a good job. Managers that are too early to judge, who perhaps have been in the Championship thus far. Unknown managers, to which I'm sure you'll probably know which ones they are, who've never been in the league as yet, and you can't really say much for them at all. And managers who might have quite a lot to prove with a pretty bad track record. So the first one in our tier list is Carlos Corberan, and he is going up into elite. He is an elite Championship manager, in my opinion, and a man that, quite frankly, has worked minor miracles in his time in the Championship thus far. Obviously, the big highlight was him getting Huddersfield to the playoff final and all of his fantastic achievements with them, given the budget, the squad. We spoke to Tommy Smith on the Borough Breakdown podcast a couple of months back, and he discussed Carlos Corberan at length and just quite how amazing of a manager he was. It was a fantastic insight. And as well as that, at West Brom, you can't underestimate the job he's done there thus far with everything that's going on off the pitch there. To get them in the playoffs comfortably last season is another outstanding achievement, and it does make you wonder what he could do with a West Brom side that is both firing on the pitch but also stable off it. So if I'm West Brom, I'm very excited for my future under Carlos Corberan. Next up, we've got Chris Wilder. Now, I'm going to try and park my personal dislike for this man aside, because if you're not a Borough fan, this might not be that relevant to you. But Chris Wilder, of course, left Borough in pretty sour circumstances. As we now know, he was pushing for moves elsewhere, and it's something I don't think anybody quite likes, and he certainly won't be getting a great reception when he comes back to the Riverside this season. But parking that and putting his, I guess, managerial Championship experience out there, there's an argument once again that you could say he's an elite Championship manager, because a bit like with Carlos Corberan, what he did at Sheffield United a couple of years back was outstanding. The way he took them from League One through the Championship up to top half Premier League was absolutely incredible. But there also has to be something said for him being a manager who since then has gone off the boil quite a bit. You know, his time at Borough ended pretty badly after a great start. Watford was pretty unconvincing, and he had Sheffield United relegated last season as one of the worst Premier League sides we've ever seen. So, you know, how much do you judge these circumstances with Chris Wilder? How do you judge them with the consequences and the circumstances at a club like Watford or Sheffield United and the mess they've been in? So I guess he has managed in tough situations quite a lot, and you can't disregard his achievements for Sheffield United, but you are going back quite a few years since then, and the good old overlapping centre-back trick might not be as unique and special as it used to be, and it'll be interesting to see if he can repeat past glories at Sheffield United this time around. So I'm going to put him solid. He would definitely have been an elite Championship manager and maybe even a solid Premier League manager once upon a time, but his stock has dropped for me. I'm going to drop him in solid, as much as it pains me to say. Daniel Farke, an elite Championship manager without question. Of course, yep, he didn't get Leeds over the line last season, but any other season Leeds would have gotten automatically promoted out the Championship, maybe even won the title. Last season the standard was absolutely ridiculous, and Leeds were the side who missed out, but not even with just Leeds and his achievements there. What he's done at Norwich over time and the promotions he's had there just shows that he is definitely one of the faces you'd turn to get your team out of the Championship. He's very, I think he's got a lot to prove at Premier League level, undoubtedly, and there's still a lot of question marks on him at that level. But in terms of the Championship, he's definitely an elite manager, maybe the most elite of them all. Danny Rohl, I'm going to put him in solid. I think the job he did last season was unbelievable. And, you know, rewind 1 year ago, you would have been in the unknown category because you just could not judge Danny Rohl whatsoever. But you cannot deny the unbelievable job he did to get Sheffield Wednesday out of the predicament they were in when everyone thought they were down, and to get them safe. And now suddenly, 12 months later, the optimism is completely shifted at Hillsborough, and I expect Sheffield Wednesday to take another step forward this season under Danny Rohl. So he's amazing. He's took to the league extremely well, and I'm very excited to see where he takes Sheffield Wednesday this season. Next up we have Des Buckingham from Oxford, and I'm going to put him in the unknown category just because I guess you could say too early to judge as well. He's done a great job getting Oxford out of League One via the playoffs. It's undoubtedly a very, very good job he's done then, an outstanding achievement, but of course, going to be up against it massively this season. Lots to do, a very tough task ahead. He's still a very young manager, so I guess it's too early to judge, but from a championship level perspective, he's an unknown quantity, and I'm praying for him in Oxford that they surprise a few people and stay up, but it's going to be extremely difficult for them. Erol Bulut, he's another one, along with Danny Rohl, who a year ago would have been unknown, but he's a solid manager in my eyes, and very much like what Danny Rohl's done, obviously not as much of a large scale. What he's done at Cardiff is still very, very impressive. You know, they were a side themselves who were tipped to be fighting around the bottom of the league last season, but Erol Bulut had them safely in mid-table, had a little eye on the playoffs every now and again, but I think what Cardiff needed was a bit of stability, and they've got that, and now we'll see if they can start building towards the top 8, the top 6 in the Championship. But I think if Erol Bulut's in charge, he's a very safe pair of hands, and they've got a very good chance of getting there if they're patient enough. Next up, we've got Johannes Hoff Thorup. May have butchered that completely, from Norwich City, and he's going in the unknown category. Not going to pretend to know much about him. He's had one previous job at Nordsjælland, I believe it is, and did a pretty good job there. So we'll see. You know, there's been a lot of championship managers who've stepped into the league who've not had experience prior and have done very, very well. So Norwich haven't got a reason to judge this manager either way, as have anyone else. So for me, you've just got to wait and see how he does at Carrow Road, and that's why he's going to be sitting alongside Des Buckingham in the unknown category. Next up, we've got John Eustace. Now, this is an interesting one because I think he's a solid championship manager, because the job he did at Birmingham was absolutely brilliant. And we all know how unfortunate and unfair it was that he got dismissed from that role, and Birmingham absolutely paid the price from that afterwards. I guess the jury's out at Blackburn, and you could put him in too early to judge if you're looking at it from a Blackburn perspective, but he did get them safe last season. He did have the help of a 30-goal-a-season striker, but they picked up some very, very impressive wins at the back end of last season at Leicester and I believe at Leeds. So that played a huge part in getting them over the line when things got tough. And I think John Eustace definitely has to take some credit in that. So I think he's a solid championship manager. I'm still not 100% sure on Blackburn and how safe they'll be this season, but if they've got John Eustace, they've got a chance. Next up, we've got John Mousinho from Portsmouth, and he's going in the unknown category as well, for obvious reasons. Like Des Buckingham, he's just come into the Championship. He's a fairly young manager once again, but did a very, very good job at Pompey, and I am, for one, hoping that Pompey can stay up this season, and I'm hoping John Mousinho will do enough to get them there, but as for the Championship, who knows? Next up, we've got Liam Manning. Now, I'm going to put him in too early to judge. Now, he did a solid job, I guess, at Bristol City last season, in the short time, well, not the short time, but the time he was there after Nigel Pearson left, of course. But we don't quite know how good he's going to be at championship level fully. I think there's a little bit of optimism at Bristol City that they're heading in the right direction. I think this is definitely the type of manager that they needed to try and take them forward into that next step. But a lot of his success has come at lower levels, in League One, for example. So yeah, there's still time for him. I think Bristol City have got plenty of time to allow him to keep developing as a manager and working away at this Bristol City team. And hopefully they can get themselves out of this mid-table slump that they're always in every season without fail. But I still think it's too early to judge whether he's a solid championship manager or not. Next up, we've got Swansea City's manager, Luke Williams. He's going to go in the same category as Liam Manning. Again, a short period last season coming in to Swansea. He sort of did an okay job. I don't think he did anything special. I don't think he did absolutely terrible. I think the only way you can sort of judge Luke Williams is just on time, basically, and to see how he does well. Again, did well at Notts County, done well at lower league level, a bit like Liam Manning. It might just take him time to really lay his mark in the Championship, but again, too early to judge one way or the other. Next up, we've got Mark Robins. Now, this is a tough one, in the fact that he's not achieved anything substantial at Coventry in terms of a promotion. But the job he's done and the longevity of what he continues to do at Coventry, I think if there was an in-between, I'd have him right between, because I guess an elite manager are managers you can hang your hat on, a manager who would get you promoted out of the league. Mark Robins hasn't proven that, but he is definitely probably the most solid manager in the Championship. Coventry fans are probably not going to like me putting him in that category, but I guess out of all the managers who've maybe not achieved a promotion in the Championship, not taken a team up, he would be the one I would definitely pick to do that, who hasn't done it yet, if that makes sense. He's the most solid Championship manager there is. It doesn't take anything away from the job he's done at Cov, how he's brought them on through tough times, the business they've done, the way he developed players, and just the absolute optimism around Coventry and the uphill trajectory, which inevitably I think will get them to the top flight eventually. But I guess until he gets them there, he won't be elite. But he's certainly done an amazing job so far and is probably the most solid Championship manager in this bracket, if that makes sense. Next up, we've got Marti Cifuentes. He deserves to be in the same category as Danny Rohl, Erol Bulut. Again, come in to a team last season that was bang in trouble in QPR and guided them to safety. He, I think, like the others, deserves to have a full season and a full crack at the Championship, and I think he will definitely improve this QPR team and take them another step further. I think them and Sheffield are in two very similar positions, although QPR haven't looked as good in terms of their recruitment as Sheffield so far. I still have faith that he won't have them in anywhere near as much trouble as to where they were at the start of last season. I think he's proven that he is a pretty solid manager at this level. Next up, you've got MC Michael Carrick, and I think it would have been too early to judge maybe a season ago, even after the brilliant job he did in that first half season following Wilder's exit, getting us to the playoffs. But after last season, he's a solid manager for me, undoubtedly. You know, last season may not have looked on paper to have been as good as the season prior, but the overhaul Borough had, the turnover we had in our squad, the number of quality loans we lost, we had to reinvest a lot of that into young players for cheap fees, bringing them on, and we needed a bit of patience. And there was only one Borough outfield player last season who didn't get injured. In fact, one player in the whole squad. It was an injury-riddled season where I don't think Carrick at any given time was able to pick his best 11, and he still had a fairly solid season, and we finished unbelievably well. And if the season had lasted a few weeks longer, he might have got us in the playoffs, which would have been an outstanding achievement. So very much like Mark Robins, albeit he's not being in the job as long, I feel like there is inevitability about Michael Carrick that if he keeps being given time at this club, he will get us there eventually. Next up, we've got Neil Harris. He's another solid Championship manager for me. I don't think many expected him to come back to the Championship after he dropped down to League Two and the likes, managing Gillingham, for example. But he's come back to Millwall, and he's done a very good job, if I'm honest. He did a very good job last season. He steered Millwall well away from safety, and they were one of the formed sides going in to the back end of last season. And I think even prior to that, his previous spell at Millwall, he did a pretty good job, given the circumstances after they'd come up from League One, of course. So a solid pair of hands. Maybe a year or so ago, had we put him in this tier list when he was in the lower leagues, you might have been questioning it a little bit. But he come back with a bang last season and did a really, really good job. And I'll be intrigued to see if he can carry this one on at Millwall this season. Next up, we've got Paul Warne. Now, this is a tough one because he's done well in the Championship to some people, but I guess on paper, he's had relegations on his CV at Rotherham. Now, I don't quite know the context to which them relegations occurred in the years prior when he was Rotherham manager, because he always, I think, did a decent job trying to keep Rotherham up, but obviously had to fight a hell of a lot of hurdles with, I guess, their lower budget, etc., among other things. But he's got Derby back into the Championship. But I still think he's not proven at this level. He's not proven because he's only ever had sides relegated, really. But he's not unknown because he's been here before. Is it too early to judge Paul Warne? I don't know. I'm going to say he's got lots to prove in terms of he's now got a big club at Derby who've got a bigger budget. They'll be expected to stay up this season, and one thing that he struggled in prior seasons with Rotherham is keeping them up. So I think he's got a lot to prove in terms of coming back into this level with a much bigger club with more pressure and seeing if he can take them that one step forward, not just to being safe, but potentially then kicking on. So I do feel like Paul Warne, for the respectable job I think he's done prior, he has still got quite a bit to prove at this level. Next up, we've got Reggie Labrie, Sunderland's manager. They finally picked one after over 100 days. He's going in the unknown category. I think out of all the new managers coming in, of course, you can't judge them really fairly at all. But the job he did prior, I think, is probably the weakest out of all the other new managers. Now, I do believe there was added context to what was happening at Lorient, where he was prior. But he does have a relegation on his CV with them. And let's not forget, he was definitely not the first on Sunderland's list. And he probably wasn't even the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, or even maybe 10th, because how long it took them to get him in. So it'll be interesting to see how this goes. With the past experience he has, how quickly will he take the championship again? Lots of pressure at the Stadium of Light. So we'll see how he gets on. Let's not judge him. Let's just say he's unknown for now. Rob Edwards, I think, goes into elite. I think the job he did at Luton was fantastic. I think even in the Premier League, he did a very respectable job and wasn't far off keeping them up in the end. I know obviously they were helped by points deductions as well, but they were by far the most competitive of the 3 promoted sides. But yeah, the way he got Luton promoted from the Championship 2 seasons ago was absolutely brilliant. And I think even prior to that, he would have done a good job at Watford had they given him the chance. And his CV's glowing. You know, the job he did at Forest Green as well was fantastic. You look at the context to which they've fallen out of the Football League since, just shows how I think he had them punching above his weight while he was there. So I think Rob Edwards is an elite manager at this level now, and it would not surprise me if he got Luton straight back up to the Premier League this season. Ryan Law's an interesting one. Now, I know Preston fans will probably not want him that high because I know there's not a great relationship there, but I think he's solid. I think, honestly, again, he did brilliant jobs previously at Plymouth, I believe, but he consistently has Preston, you know, above mid-table in the top 8, top 10, and I still think that's fantastic. You know, Preston aren't a rich team. They're not a team that often splashes the cash. They don't have the resources of a lot of the teams that are in the sort of same pool as them, in and around the top 8 or 10, and he just continues to deliver. You know, I think his teams do the basics right. Is he going to be a bit like a Nigel Pearson, where he can only take Preston so far and they now need someone else to take them into that top 6? Maybe that's the gripe. Maybe it's his football. I don't know, but I do feel like there is a ceiling on Ryan Law at Preston and how far he can take them, and there is an argument to suggest that he might need replacing if Preston want to go to that very, very next level. But I think for the job he's done thus far, he's a very solid manager. Next up, Scott Parker. Now, this is an interesting one because despite his CV and the fact he's got 2 promotions with Fulham and Bournemouth, he's still not very fancied, and I can kind of see why. You know, he had 2 very good squads at his disposal, and he still wasn't all that convincing at either club. And I don't know how great of a manager he actually is, or how much of it come down to the talent he had in his teams. But you can only look at it in terms of the CV, the promotions, and I guess you've got to say in the Championship he's an elite manager. And you know what, for all of the criticism he gets, he's probably going to do it again at Burnley, because in the similar way of Fulham and Bournemouth, he gets jobs where he's just got fantastic resources at his, you know, in the palm of his hands. I would love to see Scott Parker take over a playoff chasing, mid-table kind of Championship team, maybe a Preston, and really see how he does. I think that would be the true judgment on how good of a manager he actually is. Despite all the great promotions he's got, people still don't quite know how good Scott Parker is, and we can't disregard his disastrous spell at Club Brugge, which wasn't very good. So we might still not learn too much about him this season because, well, he's managing Burnley. But I guess for what he's done, you can only judge him on the promotions, and that makes him an elite Championship manager, albeit probably out of the other elite managers, the one that's the least convincing. Next up, we've got Steven Schumacher. Now, this is a tough one because he did well at Plymouth, and I do believe he would have continued to smash it at Plymouth, kept them a lot safer than what they were, and his stock would have risen a hell of a lot higher. But he jumped ship to Stoke and suffered the same Stoke managerial curse that many others have before him. Alex Neil, Michael O'Neill, Gary Rowett, as others have. And I don't think you can ignore the fact that Stoke seem to do this to a lot of good managers, and it makes you wonder how much of it is the coach and how much of it is the club. So I think it's too early to judge Steven Schumacher still. at Stoke. I mean, I'm going to fall into the same trap as everyone does, thinking this is the season they're finally going to take off. They'll probably finish 16th or 18th again, and if they do, it wouldn't surprise me if he's replaced, and it will be a shame if that happens because, as I say, following his spell at Plymouth, he was probably one of the most solid sought-after talents when it comes to managers in the Championship, but Stoke does have a reputation of ruining managers a little bit, so fingers crossed that he does well this season, but I'm still going to say it's too early to judge just how good he is at Stoke. If he delivers there, he'll definitely become a solid manager. If he doesn't, he'll fall into the same bracket as other Stoke managers have done in the past. Tim Walters next. He's unknown. Of course, he's another brand new manager coming in to the Championship to take over at Hull. He has had fairly impressive spells at Stuttgart and Hamburg in the past. I do feel quite optimistic for Hull, and I know there's always a degree of unknown. You don't know if they'll start slow, it might take time, they might need patience, but I think his CV is pretty good and one of the better ones of the new managers who've entered the Championship if you look at Sunderland's manager and Norwich's. So I think they'll be okay, but again, at Championship level, you can't judge him. Tom Cleverley is another one who is too early to judge. He's not quite an unknown quantity because he did have a few games last season for Watford where he did okay. He didn't set the world alight. He didn't look that disappointing either. I think he was decent. And Watford are another club a bit like Stoke where they just need to chill. They just need a period of stability where they can just let things take their time and build. And Tom Cleverley's another one where I hope he's given time at Watford. I hope they're patient with him. It would be so unfair on him if they sacked him, if they didn't start the season as well as they'd like, a bit like they did after Rob Edwards, and they might regret it if they do. So I hope he does well there, but despite his few games in charge looking okay, it's still too early to judge him. And saving the, well, worst till last, I guess, it's Wayne Rooney, who could have a bracket of his own. Lots to prove here. An absolute ton to prove for Wayne Rooney, because, of course, as we all know, maybe under the circumstances at Derby all them years ago, he did quite well, although there's still an argument that Liam Mousinho was the brains behind that. But since then, he does have a relegation on his CV, one directly, another indirectly, you could say, with obviously Derby going down. He went to DC, didn't do well there. They were towards the bottom end of their conference, although improving slightly under him. And then we all know what happened last season at Birmingham, where although he wasn't the manager who was in charge when they were relegated, he played a ginormous part in one of the most catastrophic downfalls we've ever seen from a team at this level. So Wayne Rooney has a hell of a lot to prove, and I really like Plymouth, so I pray that this is the right fit for him. Maybe he needs a team that are fighting towards the bottom, have that mentality that they need to survive, don't have as big of a budget. Maybe then he'll thrive. We'll see. It could be the making of Wayne Rooney. It also could be the absolute ultimate breaking of him, because if things don't go well here, he should never be seen at Championship level again. So out of all the managers in this tier list, he has the most to prove. So guys, there's my tier list of Championship managers. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I might link this tier list in the description so you can give it a go yourself. But let me know what managers you'd put in what bracket, or what manager you'd put your manager in, or what bracket you put your manager in, should I say, from this tier list. Any you agree with, any you disagree with, let me know in the comment section below. And as always, if you've enjoyed this video, do give it a like and subscribe for much more Championship and football-related content coming as the season gets ever so near. Subscribe so you never miss a video, and hit the bell too. And as always, keep supporting the channel by hitting a like on the video. It's much appreciated. But until next time, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.